Hey everyone, Tim the Dart Man. You ever think about averages and really think about what's important in a game of darts, especially a game of 501? So is a 93 average any better than, say, an 84 average? No. Is a 79 average any better than a 72 average? No. Okay, well how about is a 68 average any better than a 62 average? No. And I'm going to tell you why. Because you got to get there by how many trips you take to the hockey. So I'll explain in more detail. Let me get the camera turned around and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so in a game of darts, what's most important? Beating your opponent or getting a higher average? Obviously, what's most important is beating your opponent. So you can easily beat your opponent with a far less average than he or she has. And I'm going to tell you why. Because what's most important in a game of darts is taking less trips to the hockey than your opponent. Now, if your opponent goes first, you're never going to take less trips than him, but you can go out quicker than him, hopefully, if you're shooting well. But what's important is to take as few trips to the hockey as possible. So that being said, a 13 darter is no better than a 15 darter. And likewise, a 16 darter is no better than an 18 darter. And you can see where I'm going here. A 19 darter, no better than a 21. And a 22 darter, no better than a 24. And a 25 darter, no better than a 27. Because if you have to make that trip to the hockey, it doesn't matter whether you're out in one dart or in 3 darts. If you hit it in 1 dart, if you say you already have 21 darts thrown and you step up for the 8th trip to the hockey, you hit it in 1 dart, it's 68 average. Great, right? Sure, but it really doesn't matter if you hit it in the 2nd dart for a 65 average or the 3rd dart for a 24 average. What really matters is that you went out in that trip to the hockey. So if you look here, here are some scores, right? 13 darter, 115.6. So if you're thinking about it that way, you're going to go out in 5 rounds. Whether you get a 115.6 average or a 100.2 average for a 15 darter, it doesn't matter. You still had to take that 5th trip to the hockey. Same thing on the 6th trip. 93.9 average for a 16, looks good on the scorecard, but it really doesn't matter whether you get this in the 16th dart or the 18th dart. 83.5, 10 less, because really what matters is on that trip to the hockey, you won the game. Go down to a 7th trip to the hockey, 19 darter, 79.1, 21 darter, 71.6. So it's almost an 8-point difference in average, but it's still the 7th trip to the hockey. 8th trip goes from a 22 darter at 68.3 to a 24 darter at 62.6. And that's an average of just under 6, right? So again, doesn't matter whether you went out on the 22nd dart or the 24th dart, you still had to take 8 trips to the hockey, and what matters is you went out during that trip. Same thing on the 9th trip. 25 darter will give you a 60 average, which we all think is pretty good if you can get that over a bunch of games. But a 27 darter will get you a 55.7 average. And so, in effect, as long as you went out in that 9th, trip to the hockey, then in effect you're shooting the same, right? Whether it's a 55 or a 60 average, it's still the 9th trip to the hockey. So everyone likes to have their average score as high as possible, and it's kind of fun to try to achieve that. But what's important in a game of darts is not necessarily what your average is, but how many trips did you have to make to the hockey to go out. And what you will notice, and it's just a simple fact of math, right? So let's say you go in the 5th trip to the hockey and you're lucky enough to go out. Now if you hit it in 13 darts, that's 115 average. If you hit it in 15, that's 100.2. That's an average of 15.4 on your average, and that's huge. But as you go, you see the averages the difference start to crunch down to where the 9th trip, again, 25th dart, 60.1, 27th dart, 55.7. So that's a difference of 4.4. So the difference in the average really crunches down. And so, if you happen to go into the 10th leg and you go out in the 10th leg, the worst you're going to do is a 50 average on the 30th dart. So if you're looking strictly at average, yeah, getting up in here, trying to get out in as few darts as possible is always good. But remember, if you want to win the game that you're playing, you want to win the leg that you're playing, and what you want to do is think about, if I'm up there for that 7th trip to the oche, I've got 3 darts. If I get in the first one, great, but I'm not going to panic because I still have 2 more. And so that's why I'm saying a 68 average is no better than a 62 average in a game, and a 60 average no better than a 55.7 average. Tim the Dart Man, let me know what you think.